From the center of the universe, now in its 7th season covering your 19-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast with Argos color analyst Ben Grant and Coach JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. My name's Ben Grant, joined as always by JB, and we are here to get you set for Week 9 in the CFL season with your Toronto Argonauts looking to move into a playoff spot and take back that crossover with a win over the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at Princess Auto Stadium in what is the second half of a home-and-home series. Here is what is on the docket for this week. We're going to talk about Chad Kelly being put on the 6-game injured list, what that means and why it probably doesn't change too much, at least in my mind. Plus, we'll get into a couple of signings that were made this week, but for once this season, not the result of some catastrophic injury in the game before. So we'll go through those and crossover talk. Should Toronto fans have been happy with Hamilton's win over the BC Lions? Why the crossover makes cheering for other CFL games so difficult? Plus, we'll have all our usual stuff, pick six, a game preview, the injury report, OCDC, one thing, put me down for 20, and challenge flag. All that and more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. All right, JB, before we get into our content of the show, let's just talk about Something in the Water Brewing for a moment. Our title sponsors, there has never been a better time to go to Something in the Water Brewing. Not only are they steps from Lamport Stadium and BMO Field, where you can find your Toronto Argonauts, they have got a new recipe for Longboat, the beer that was made for you, fans of the Double Blue. They haven't changed it dramatically, but they have changed part of their malting process. And in the works in what's sort of come from that is a delicious tasting beer that's sort of got a peach mango kind of finish to it, sort of a session IPA now instead of a pale ale. If you haven't tried it this year, if you've not tried the new Longboat, you've got to get down to Something in the Water to try it out. And you'll notice some construction going on when you're down there. That's because Ghost Taco is coming into the picture, where Something in the Water Brewing has combined with Ghost Taco to bring you some delicious tacos so you can enjoy more great food while you are enjoying award-winning and delicious beer. Nothing better than sitting on the patio at Something in the Water Brewing. JB, let's get into it. It's Chad Watch, but of a different sort. So after the game Saturday night, the Argos put Chad Kelly on the 6-game injured list. Let's go to you first. What do you make of this move? Does this change anything for you? How do you see it?
Doesn't change anything. I did feel that we probably weren't going to see him this season. It doesn't feel like his recovery is progressing at the rate that they were hoping. It makes sense to not have the Chad question hanging over you. I think putting him on the 6th game takes some of that pressure off as to wondering every week if he's going to play or not. So it makes sense from that point of view. But I just don't feel confident that, after this much time, that there's going to be improvement to the point where he's going to be able to play. I just don't.
I don't share that opinion. I don't, again, and neither of us can know the answer to this. We're kind of going on our gut feeling. We've both seen a lot of football before, and based on what you've seen, you feel you've seen enough injuries to believe that, I just don't think this is happening. And I get that side of it. It's just, watching him at practice, he looks close to me, and he's looked close for a long time. But I know that's the concern, is that I thought he looked pretty close about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And so the question is then why isn't he back? To me, this is going to be something that gets resolved this season. I believe Toronto will have Chad Kelly playing quarterback for them this season. I don't know when. My instinct is that he will not see out this whole 6-game injured list, that it will actually be sooner than that. But I'm not basing it on anything other than what my eyes tell me at practice, that he looks pretty good and he looks fairly ready to go. Now, Coach Dinwiddie, when he was asked about this, he has, I've heard actually two different things. It's essentially saying the same thing. He says day to day, week to week. And to me, that's very different than saying, well, it's going to be a while. It's going to be at least, 4 to 6 weeks that we're looking at. That's like, he didn't say that. He said day to day, week to week. And I honestly believe that has been what they have thought from the beginning. I think early on, when they expected him, when they sort of said, maybe first couple weeks of the season, I think they really believed that. And then after that, when they said maybe after the bye, I think they really believed that too. The thing is, this is a very tricky injury. It involves more than just the bones. It's all the soft tissue around it. It's complicated. I don't know with Chad's particular procedure if there was like pinning, if there's hardware in there, but that can complicate things too. So who knows what's going on inside Chad Kelly's leg? I have to go with what the coaching staff is saying. And right now, they seem to be of the opinion that he's going to be coming back at some point. And so that's the opinion that I share as well.
Well, here, let me put this hypothetical to you, though. It's not even that much of a hypothetical. If he's out, say, 4 more weeks, the Argos to really be at a shot at a playoffs are going to need to probably go 3-1. 4-0 would be great, but probably 3-1 to kind of make up ground. At what point does it become, like, I would say, like right now, it would be quite easy to switch quarterbacks, but at what point does it become more challenging to switch out Arbuckle, who has driven the bus for 3/4 of the season, to the other quarterback?
Well, I don't think you mean switch Arbuckle to Chad Kelly?
Yeah.
I think it's automatic. Like there's a tier difference between Chad Kelly and everybody else.
I know. I thought it was automatic for 6 games, but are you going to go automatic at week 12?
Would you look at it from like a Winnipeg Blue Bomber standpoint? Suppose it was Zach Collaros and he's going to be out until like week 18. Would you put him in for Chris Strevler? Like, of course you would. If he's healthy and ready to go, you put him in. He's your guy. Like, there's such a tier class between those top guys. But like, I know what you're saying though. Like it's weird. It does feel strange. Like some people have said, look at the BC Lions last year and kind of what went wrong there, where you had Vernon Adams playing great football and then Nathan Rourke came in and the team wasn't the same after that. Like, I get what you're saying, but Vernon Adams is another number one. And,
I agree with you. It feels different because Arbuckle has started the season. You know what I mean? It feels different because he began the season, where like Strevler is like coming in the middle of the season, and you know what I mean. It just feels different that if Arbuckle basically keeps the Argos in contention, I think it's a little tougher. But I get your point.
And the question of, because the first thing people have been saying is as soon as he went on the 6th game, people are like, well, why did they do that from the beginning of the year? We've talked about some of the benefits of having him at practice all year long, but I think that goes further to show you that they really didn't expect it to go this long. Because I think if they had thought that here we would be week 9 and Chad still not able to play, I think for sure they would have actually put him on the 6th game, and they probably would have taken him off a couple of weeks ago and now sort of had him acclimating and spending time with his receivers and running backs, etc. But I think that goes to show you that this is not the coaching staff trying to pull one over on everybody. If they believed Chad Kelly was going to be injured this whole time, they wouldn't have taken up a roster spot with that. And you can see now with him on the 6th game, they are using that available roster spot. We got transactions to talk about, and maybe that's going to be our nice segue. Anything more on that topic, JB, just before we switch into the signings for this week?
I got another one for you.
Go for it.
Do you have a drop dead week? So suppose Chad is available week 17.
Yeah, so that's tough. So 21. Let's see, we got a 21-week regular season. Argos don't have a last week bye. I think that's getting pretty close. Like I think that's around there. But it's almost like that's a disaster though. Like there's no right answer to that, because do you have Arbuckle start and Chad's on the bench? Like how do you think that's going to, you know how that script will go, because we've seen enough to know like when you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have any. So yeah, that's a problem. Like if Arbuckle ends up continuing to play well, the Argos end up with a playoff spot and are actually building some momentum, it does get tough. Like it's among the reasons you want Chad back sooner. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, if you feel Chad is healthy enough to play, then you play him over Arbuckle, and really no matter what is going on. He's an MOP. He is in the conversation every time as best player in the CFL, and I think it would be silly if he's healthy not to put him on the field. I think you have to put him on the field, but I know like that there's a point where it does start to get kind of painful and awkward. Let's transition into the transactions, JB. Two signings this week, none that are going to make headlines anywhere, but the Argos have brought in two veteran, accomplished special teams contributors. First of all, both Canadians, linebacker Jordan Herdman-Reed and Canadian fullback / receiver Felix Garand-Gauthier. So Herdman-Reed, first of all, 6 feet, 235. He was with the Saskatchewan Roughriders in training camp this year, played for them last year, was in 13 games, had 8 special teams tackles during that time. He's been around the CFL for 7 years, has a long career as a proven special teamer, a guy that can jump in right away. He was wearing number 49 at Argos practice this morning. And then on the other side of the ball, Garand-Gauthier is wearing number 38. 6'1", 225, guy that can kind of play multiple positions, but that's often the indicator of a special teams player that you can kind of have backing up at multiple different spots. He has been with Hamilton his entire career after being drafted by the Ticats. He was a 5th round draft pick in 2021. And again, a very accomplished special teamer. Over 31 games, he's had 59 special teams tackles. And so, a few receptions in there too, 16 receptions, 246 yards. But yeah, two guys that could immediately contribute. If you needed them to step in this week, you could put them in comfortably in their special teams roles. In terms of the need though, JB, does this go along with your churning over the bottom of the roster philosophy? Because I don't see a specific spot where one guy goes down and you're like, man, we need a guy to fill that role. I haven't really seen that unless they're still looking for a replacement for Kwamu, for example. But I don't know if that's what we've got here. I think just bringing in other guys and seeing if you can make something work.
Maybe Cassar is not as close as they hope. It makes sense. Special teams is, it has definitely been an issue. So if you can churn in a couple of guys who might be able to contribute on specials, because it's going to be crucial. Like if the Argos have any hope of being in the playoff picture, their special teams is going to have to play lights out, for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and they are like they're both like they look like they've got the potential to be special team studs. Like even though we've seen them play, you see their body types. Like they're both built like the exact same way, basically around that 6 foot mark, 225, 235, and they can move. And so yeah, I do think Cassar is close to being able to return. We'll see for this week. I think it's possible. This week or next, I think you'll probably see Cassar back. But yeah, you can't, like, one game makes a big difference. We've seen that already this season where that, the Saskatchewan game we've talked about, if Cassar is in there, maybe that touchdown return doesn't happen. If Harlemana is in there at that point, maybe they don't end up going out there with 11 guys on the field. Special teams matters a lot in this league. And so I applaud them bringing in two guys that have that experience and you don't have to start from scratch with to get them up to speed on special teams. Crossover talk. This, I find this topic very funny. I've done a lot of radio for Western cities in the last couple of weeks. And one of the first things that I get asked is about the crossover playoff picture. I've got one coming up later on today, actually. I wonder if that will also be among the first questions that I'll be asked. People want to know, is that what people in the East are talking about? Winnipeg and BC perhaps getting that third and fourth playoff spot in the West. The way the crossover playoffs work, if you're new to the CFL, the first team, the team that finishes first in the East and in the West automatically gets a bye in the first round of the playoffs. And generally, the second place team hosts the third place team. The exception to that, the crossover rule, is that if the fourth place team in the West or the East has a better record than the third place team in the opposite division, then they in fact get that spot as well. So in theory, so if like Toronto and Ottawa like lost every game for the rest of the season, then Winnipeg would finish third in the West, BC would finish fourth, but BC would actually play. They would actually play the second place team in the East in that East playoff. So in that way, you could actually have like a BC Winnipeg Grey Cup in theory with the crossover, which is kind of fun. I like the rule. I think it's a rule that probably favors the West, but I do like the rule. I think that's a good rule. Why I don't like it is that it makes knowing who to cheer for very hard for fans. There were a lot of people that were conflicted watching the last game of the week, Hamilton at BC, because they're looking at it saying, well, I think we want Hamilton to lose because they're our hated rival. They're ahead of us in the division, and a loss puts us closer to catching them. But on the other side of things, Hamilton's win has meant that Toronto is now just one win this week with BC on a bye, one win out of being in a playoff spot. And for the crossover, it's not good enough to be tied with the opposite team. The tiebreaker is division. And so the Argos belong in the East, so they have the tiebreaker. So BC would have to have a better record at the end of the season. How do you view this crossover? Do you think it's at all automatic, or is this something the West is just dreaming about for some reason?
Well, I mean, after these games this week, Toronto's probably going to need that crossover. I think catching Hamilton and Montreal is not likely to happen. So they're far more likely to get in ahead of a Western team for Toronto's playoff chances. I don't think Winnipeg's very good. I don't think BC's very good. So, we definitely, if you look at our power, I had them up there in the power poll, but, they just, when you look now as teams start to sort of match up against other teams, essentially Winnipeg beat BC and nobody else. So yeah, I don't think either. I think those teams are both going to be in trouble all season. I think that neither of them can beat Hamilton or Montreal, and I think they're going to be in it against Calgary and Saskatchewan. So Toronto definitely has a chance to get in ahead of those two teams.
Yeah, I think so too. Like I don't see any path, like unless Toronto just continues to lose games the way they did in the first few weeks of the season, which is possible. But I just think they're playing much better football and they're starting to get healthier now. And yeah, they don't have Chad Kelly, but the team is good enough without, as we saw this past week, to win games. And all they have to do is stay even with one of those two teams, Winnipeg and BC. And should they win this week, they would be tied in record with Winnipeg. And so they would both be at 3-5. Or no, sorry, they'd be at 3-4.
Like for fans, I wouldn't scoreboard watch Montreal or Hamilton. They're gone. Just watch the Western teams. That's the path to the playoffs.
I still think I still think you want to try and catch Montreal and Hamilton. Montreal's going nowhere right now. Like I know Montreal just beat Calgary. It was a miracle that they did. I just can't see them running away right now. Who knows how long Davis Alexander is going to be out. I'm still not even 100% sold with him. Like they're a better team with him than without, but they're not unbeatable by any means. And Hamilton's been very lucky. They haven't had the major injuries. Bo Levi Mitchell's playing extremely good football. Their offense looks great. That defense is susceptible. They can give up a lot of points. And so I'm not ready to crown either of those two. It's too early. We're talking about 7 games in to an 18-game slate. There's just so much that can happen. There's still the crossover with Hamilton that's in play. So I think it's too early to give on that. Now, when you've got a head-to-head matchup, when you've got Montreal or Hamilton playing BC or Winnipeg, does that change? Maybe it does. But I think any other game that you're watching and Montreal and Hamilton are involved, of course, you're as an Argos fan, you should be cheering against Hamilton and Montreal. I think that's a given. But yeah, it does make it more interesting when they play Winnipeg and BC. We'll see what the next, I'm trying to look ahead in the schedule. Like when's the next matchup that Winnipeg or BC has? It's coming up Thursday, August 7th, BC at Hamilton. That's another one of those games that Argos fans may be torn over. I know there are some Argos fans that no matter what will not bring themselves to cheer for the Ticats, even if it's at Toronto's expense. So for you, we're not really talking to you in that case, and in which case, I totally respect that. Go for it. But if you're wondering from a standings point of view, I can totally see the argument. All right, let's get into Pick 6, JB. Pick 6 is a segment we run every week. It's sponsored by Something in the Water Brewing. And how this works is you submit your questions every week. We do it on Twitter. We do it on Blue Sky. Twitter is at Ben_Grant. On Blue Sky, it's at Coach Ben Grant. Send me a question when prompted. And if we answer your question on this podcast, on our pregame walkthrough podcast, you win a 6-pack of beer from Something in the Water Brewing. And I don't think there is a better prize you can win in this hot Toronto heat. Over 40 degrees humidity right now as we're recording this. There is nothing like a cold, delicious beer on a patio, and you can win 6 of them from Something in the Water Brewing. Our winner this week is Gary McConnell. Gary has submitted the following question, JB. I'll maybe go to you on your take first, and then I'll follow up. Gary has a question about practice rosters with 2 signings coming today. He asks, is there an unwritten understanding between teams not to claim players from another team's practice roster? And just before I let you answer, every team has an active roster, and then they have players that they sign to their practice roster who are not active, and it is those players that teams technically can sign, but in order to sign them, you have to sign them to your active roster. So if Toronto wants one of Hamilton's practice roster players, they have to have them active, which means they have to dress on game day. So JB, that's the question for you. Is there an unwritten understanding?
Yeah, there definitely is. I think I wouldn't go so far as to call it collusion. I don't think they get together in secret meetings, but I think there's a kind of a true like a truth or a détente among the teams that the practice squad is a valuable part of the development system, and if they all start raiding each other's development systems, it becomes unworkable. So I think they just sort of understand, I won't raid you, you won't raid me. It's similar to the NHL and offer sheets. They're rarely done just because usually they'll initiate retribution. If you take some guy, then it's like, well, I'm going to spend the rest of the season picking your guys. And, it becomes a trade-off. So like, unless you love a player, it's probably not worth the headache of having a team scour your practice squad every week.
And it should be mentioned, the player has to be in agreement too. You can't just like make it happen. The player has to, because they're the ones that has to go and sign the new contract. So for example, last year, one of the rare examples we've seen of that, Deontay Knight was signed by the Hamilton Tiger Cats off the Argos practice roster. And so for that to work, the Argos could have fought that by putting Knight on there, like by signing Knight to their active roster. So that's one way that you can avoid having someone poached off your practice roster, but it forces you into a position that you didn't want. Now, the other part of that is Knight had to agree to sign with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. He can't just be taken. It's not like a trade that way where he has no say in the matter. So he has to then agree to sign a contract with the Hamilton Tiger Cats as part of that transaction. So there's multiple pieces, and players often won't. Like, there are a number of cases that I have heard of teams making a claim on somebody and that player choosing, in fact, to stay in the city that they're in, believing that they've made more steps, more ground than going to someplace new where they don't know the lay of the land, where they don't necessarily see a long-term path for themselves. Because you would say, well, why would a player ever choose to be on a practice roster versus going to play for a team's active roster? If they look at the situation, they're like, yeah, you want me to be on the active roster now, but I can see this player's coming back from injury in 2 weeks, and then I'm obviously going to be out the door, and then I don't have a job at all. Like, maybe the team I was with won't take me back to their practice roster. So in some cases, I can see why players would actually want to stick with their clubs. So a little bit yes and no, Gary, but it's an interesting question. I love the question, and I find it really fascinating to see how teams navigate practice rosters every year. Roster management in general in the CFL, I find to be one of the most interesting things in all of sports. All right, JB, let's get into our game preview. It's the second half of a back-to-back, head-to-head, city-to-city. Is this the same in your mind, JB, as playing Winnipeg, let's say like 4 or 5 weeks apart? Like, how is it any different to you? You play every team twice. How does being back-to-back in back-to-back weeks change things up for you?
In terms of playing Winnipeg?
Just in terms of preparing, like from a coaching standpoint, does it make a difference to play the same team in back-to-back weeks or 4 weeks apart? Like either way, you're playing the same team home and away. What's so special
Yeah.
about back-to-back?
Well, in some ways, it's easier because there's definitely less. There's less time to study the film and to devise adjustments, and the adjustments you're making are probably going to be less sort of major, less significant, more tweaks than major adjustments. So I think from a team point of view, the back to back is great. I think if you're the better team, you have a great shot of winning the back to back. I think it's very hard to make any significant adjustments in a week.
It is. I find that in back-to-back games,
Look at Calgary, right? I mean, Calgary beat the stuffing out of Winnipeg 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, it's a pretty good measure of coaching staff as well as a team. But I think that the way you come into back to back in some ways is the way you come into short weeks too, where with a short week, you're often bringing out plays that you've been sitting on, plays that you haven't brought out yet, plays that you had installed for week 3 or week 4. And you're like, we never showed this, we never really got to this. Maybe this would be a good time to bring that out. That's how short weeks are often composed, because you're missing days. So you will go to some of that stuff that you haven't taken out of the box yet and use that as part of your philosophy. But I think coming into back-to-backs, that's where a lot of that prep has already been done, I'm sure, by both coaching staffs. Like every play that Toronto put out last week could, in theory, be setting up something for this week. Like that's how I like to structure back-to-backs. Like coaching against the same team 2 weeks in a row, I'm very cognizant of what I'm showing in week 1. Some of it's by design, some of it's just stuff I think will work, and I'm trying to score points, obviously. But some of it I'm actually doing to set up something I plan on doing in week 2. And so the tricky part is the other team knows this as well. And so Toronto's preparing right now for Winnipeg. Winnipeg's preparing for Toronto. They know that the other team knows they're going to be running stuff off of what they just ran. But it makes it very difficult. You can get into your own head by overthinking things when you're watching film and you're like, okay, well, I see, they ran this concept 3 times. Does that mean when they line up in this exact same look and they start to run this concept again, that I should think it's actually totally something different and not jump this short route or whatever it is? Probably. But again, you can really get into the weeds and stuff like this, which I love. It's a battle of wits in some ways. So I'm excited about that possibility. JB, do you think from some of the big plays that we saw this past week from Toronto, like the opening play, Janarian Grant throwing the pass, are you as Winnipeg, are you looking to be burned by the counter to that this week? Because that's something you're preparing for, saying, okay, we saw this, now he's probably going to run it or whatever.
I bet you Winnipeg is cooking something up. I think anytime you get burned by a trick play, it's going to make the coaching staff angry. My guess is there's been, an attempt to try and return in kind. So if I were Toronto, I would certainly be looking for, a reverse on the kick return, maybe halfback option, maybe. What else can they run really? I guess there's not a lot of options for trick plays, but maybe with Strebler, it's hard to
and
say.
They already ran the fake punt, and that didn't go well. They were actually like 0 for 2 with trick plays against the Argos. The one the Argos ran and the one Winnipeg ran.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to. I think being ready for a trick play is just fundamental football, right? So you just have to. Trick plays work because teams cheat. Teams, they rush on run or on punt. They're not looking to make sure the ball gets off before they turn around. So as long as you drill home fundamentals, trick plays can't work if you're fundamentally sound. They only work when you're cheating.
That's very true. And we've already kind of we've already sort of talked about the importance of this game for both teams in the standings. Winnipeg currently sitting at 500 at 3-3. Toronto sitting at 2-5. They would tie in terms of wins. Toronto doesn't technically, I guess, go ahead of Winnipeg because Winnipeg would have a game in hand. But to me, this is a very big game for Winnipeg. It's at home. They've been selling out. It's going to be a great crowd there. But they have dropped now 3 straight games, back-to-back against Calgary and then a game against Toronto. They are going to go into full panic mode if they lose their 4th game in a row. They're probably, I'm guessing, going to be without Zach Collaros. Who knows? Because the reason I'm saying that is because they didn't get to practice today. This was supposed to be day 1 of practice for both teams. The smoke level was off the charts in Winnipeg today, so the team wasn't able to practice. So we don't have an injury report or practice report. So we have nothing to go on. We don't know if Zach Collaros was going to be taking any snaps at all, or how that was going to be working. So that's why I'm a little bit in the dark there. But I'm assuming it's going to be Strevler. This is a massive game for Winnipeg. And as much as Toronto's 2-5 and needs to win and needs to get back into the playoff picture, I think it's almost a bigger game for Winnipeg. And I certainly think there's going to be more pressure on the Blue Bombers than there's going to be on the Argos because of the fact that it's being played at Princess Auto in Winnipeg and not in Toronto. So yeah, this is going to be a good one. Let's get into this injury report as much as we can. Winnipeg doesn't have one, so the guys that we're looking for this week, if you are listening to this on Wednesday and Thursday, you can check the injury reports on the CFL roster. Take a look at Stanley Bryant, what his status is. You also are going to obviously be interested in Zach Collaros and whether or not he is able to practice. I think my guess is if he's limited or not practicing at all tomorrow, Wednesday, then that's it. I think you're going to see Strevler play this week on Friday. But those are the 2 big names. The other one that you might notice is I wonder if Dylan Mitchell is now going to be inserted into the lineup because of the fact that Case is obviously out. He suffered that serious injury. Schoen is not expected back. And so Dylan Mitchell probably is going to be getting first team reps, I would guess. And he has shown the ability to be very dangerous. I know he's obviously a guy that wasn't starting over the guys that were starting last week as a healthy scratch, but I would expect him to be in the lineup, and he brings some speed and some dynamic play that Winnipeg doesn't necessarily have on the field without him. So that would be one that's interesting to watch. And for Toronto, nothing major coming out of last week's game. I think there's a good chance that Sage Dockstader comes back this week. The team is practicing this week at Michael Power instead of at Lamport Stadium this week, and Sage Dockstader out there. He was dressed for the last game but didn't play. He's getting reps again this week, and so hopefully can work himself up to a point where he's ready to go. But I actually thought that Shane Richards filled in very well considering he'd only had a couple of days of practice after signing. Considering all of that, I thought his play was good. So even if Dockstader can't go this week, I think it's perfectly fine to go with the same setup. Have Richards start, then have Dockstader as the first man off the bench. Have Sirocco as your tight end, who was fantastic in the 2 plays where they ran in his direction. Sirocco as a tight end, which has never happened before as far as I know. It got great blocks on guys. Both were successful runs. One of them, I think, was that 30-yarder that LeBourne ripped off, heading Dockstader's way and then cutting back. So that's all we've got in terms of injuries. Of course, Chad Kelly we've talked about already, and everyone else we're just kind of weathering the storm and hoping that they, whether it's Mac Mahan or McManus, that they continue to get better and better, and that the risk of re-injury becomes less and less as we go forward.
I'm quite curious to see what Winnipeg lists Collaros' injury as.
Well, they haven't been very forthcoming because they were asked.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, but they never are. Like Winnipeg's not forthcoming on injuries. But after the game, I know John Hodge from 3 Down Nation asked after the game if he could even say whether it was an upper body or lower body injury, and he wasn't even going to give them that. So there was nothing. There was no naming of any injury yet at all. So yeah, we'll see what's on the official injury report if there ever is one. Maybe Winnipeg's not going to be able to practice this week. I don't know. The smoke. I've never seen, like, when I looked at the chart that was posted for Winnipeg, like right by Princess Auto Stadium, like right by that part of Winnipeg, the numbers were, I think, 111, which was beyond the top level where you're not supposed to even go outside. So that's obviously not a good sign. And there's bigger things than just football for that. You hate to see that for the environment, obviously, and knowing that that's smoke is coming from somewhere, which is obviously a problem for those people affected. So a bigger problem than football. But in terms of this being a football podcast, we'll have to wait and see where Winnipeg practices, if they practice this week at all. All right, it is time for your favorite segment, JB. It's OCDC. For OCDC, JB handles the defense for both teams. I handle the offense for both teams. We give you our plans. This one's a little weird because it's a back-to-back. We'll start with you, JB. The defensive side of the ball will open up with the bad guys, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. You are the defensive coordinator for Winnipeg. What are you going to do to stop Nick Arbuckle and this Argonauts offense that ran up points against you last week?
Well, I think that you have to feel pretty confident that you can improve your defense. I mean, Toronto is pretty one-sided in terms of what they're going to try and do. So if you're Winnipeg, I think that you just have to play much tighter man defense. I think you have to really push and press Toronto to try and get off. Like as close to press coverage as you can play in Canadian football. The O-line held up. I thought we talked about it. Toronto did a really good job of managing the pass rush. So you still have that in your back pocket. I think in obvious passing downs, Toronto is still in trouble. But I think Winnipeg will be less aggressive. I think Toronto, we talked about like be aggressive until you learn you can't be. I think Toronto showed that they won't just be bullied off the field in terms of defensive pass rush the way Montreal did in the second half. So if I'm Winnipeg, I'm going to probably dial that back a little bit in terms of pass rush and put a little more focus on closing down those easy receptions, closing down those 10, 15-yard receptions, and force Arbuckle to try and throw deep more. And I think that's what you're looking to do. And again, I don't think you're really worried about run at all. So defensively, you should be in better shape. I think if you dial back the pass rush, you're going to be a little more settled and a little more balanced in your defense and less aggressive. I would look for it to be a less aggressive and just let keep everything in front of you and kind of let Arbuckle make his mistakes for you.
Switching to the offensive side for Winnipeg, they did not go with my plan for last week, and I want them to go back to my plan for last week. Like, that's what they should do. My plan for last week was run, and then don't stop running. And they ran in the first quarter, and then in the second quarter, Oliveira had one carry, and they basically abandoned the running game after that entirely. And it was working. It was getting good chunks. When Oliveira came out, he was into the 40s in yards rushing on like 6 carries. That's successfully running the football. And now you're probably going to have Chris Streveler back there too. You just gotta run the football, pound the middle. Like, that is where Toronto's been vulnerable. Force the Argonauts to put that backup group on the field, the heavy run stoppers, Correa and Pally. Like, force Toronto to play with those guys for more downs than they want to by gashing them up the middle, and don't go away from it. You've got to stick with it. And if it means rotating your backs in, that's fine. Winnipeg's got a bunch of very capable backs. They can rotate guys in. That's okay. Where they do have to occasionally take shots, this is where I do want to use Dylan Mitchell. I don't know if he's going to be the guy who's in to replace Case. I'm not sure. but he's got speed, and I like Mitchell deep. I still like, they've got a few guys that I don't mind throwing too deep. Obviously, we saw Dembski connect on a deep pass from Kolaris. He's very capable of it. Wheatfall as well. I just want to keep running go routes, keep running verts, like 3 or 4 verts on all of those running plays. Don't even run block, run verts and test the discipline of those DBs. So then when you suddenly do play fake after gashing the Argos for a big gain, now you look to hit someone over top. Like force those DBs to play honest. And as an offensive coordinator, you're up in the booth, or your guy's up in the booth watching. And as soon as the DBs are starting to get nervous about coming in for secondary run support, now you pull the trigger on that play action and look for a big score. Because it is tough. Like without that pass, it is tough to beat teams in the CFL if you can only run. And so that's where you're going to have to hit some of those plays over the top. But it starts with running the football from everyone you've got that can run the football. All right, let's switch to the good guys. JB, what is your defensive plan for the Toronto Argonauts? It worked pretty well last week. Do you do the same thing, or do you have some different tweaks in mind?
Well, it is different, right? Because I think it will be Strebler who is quarterback, and he obviously poses different problems as we saw in that second half. But also, there are advantages to Strebler being in. They have to focus on the run. I don't think they'll go away from it the way they did. The run was largely unstoppable. I think the Argos have to dedicate more attention to middle run, especially with Strebler. It's going to be really crucial that everybody, not just setting edges, but you have to have lane discipline. You have to have a guy in every lane. You can't just push upfield, because he will take those 7-8 yards every time. You can get into trouble there. So from a pass rush point of view, linebackers, defensive linemen, you have to make sure everybody's in a lane. Everything is accounted. Don't get too overexcited. You're much better to just hold your lane and force Strebler to throw the ball. Don't worry about sacking Chris Strebler. That's not the problem. What do you worry? He's not going to throw for 350 yards. Just keep him in front of you. Don't let him run, and you'll be in great shape. And I think, you have to. Winnipeg does not have big plays. They're not a big play team. But defensively, they love to scramble. So if you do break down and you don't set the edge, and Strebler's scrambling, your plaster defense, your ability to handle scramble, your scramble rules have to be on point. You have to be able to pick up those guys who are now just turning it into backyard football, which is what Strebler does. So defensively, DBs have to be able to find a guy and stay with them down the field. I would probably play more of an umbrella and basically say, look, if Strebler wants to throw 14 passes and pushes his team down the field, so be it. But I'm not going to let him run, and I'm not going to let him get outside the pocket and throw a 40-yard bomb because of scramble rules. So I'm going to keep everything in front of me. I'm not going to try and sack him. I'm just going to force him, like the opposite of what you would do, with a really talented quarterback who might pick you apart. Here, you're like, yeah, pick us apart. I dare you to pick us apart.
For the Toronto offense, I look at what happened last week. Winnipeg did a really good job of taking away the shallow level, taking away the running back level. Like, that's something that Toronto has had a lot of success with this season, throwing to the running backs. Some games, running backs have been their leading receiver, actually in a couple of different games. And yet they did not have a single pass completed to a running back last week. Not entirely because Winnipeg was taking that away. There was also, that wasn't seemingly as much a part of the game plan, but it was something that happened nevertheless. And so I think Winnipeg, in watching their own film this week, is going to see Toronto actually beat them in the second level a lot, where guys were coming up to play the flats, guys were coming up to take running backs out, and it was actually in behind them that Arbuckle was able to connect with a lot of his passes in that sort of second tier depth. Not necessarily the deep bombs, but those sort of mid-range plays. And so I think this week, as you get like flood concepts and concepts where you've got like 3 different guys to one side of the field, all occupying different zones, I think instead of playing up, you're now going to have those guys playing off a little bit. And so I'm okay with checkdowns this week. I think there's going to be real potential this week for run after the catch. And so I think quick hitters on screens, I think those quick out routes from receivers, speed outs, but I think running backs out of the backfield on swings, on flat routes, running back screens, which they didn't run last week. They ran the DeVaris Daniels center screen. No reason why you can't execute that same screen, but like a running back look the same way, or running backs on Texas routes and get them underneath. That also can catch a blitz and has big play potential while being a fairly low risk pass. So that's my plan for passing the football. In terms of running the football, I want to go with what I went with last week, which they didn't do. I want the misdirection. They ran the football fairly well last week, but not with misdirection. And so I want to see that. This is where I want to see jet sweeps. Like it looked like they were going to with Janarian Grant to open the game last week, but he threw the football. But that's the kind of stuff I do want to see. And then the fakes off of that, like really stretch the field horizontally and look for run after the catch, because I think Winnipeg is going to back themselves up this week. One last thing. Demonte Coxie matched up with Bonds. He's got half a foot on him, and yet they only threw a jump ball to Coxie once. They targeted him a bunch of times in other passes. Coxie had a huge day, but it wasn't on the jump ball. This is the week that I think you use that half foot advantage, even more than half foot of reach and extension and vertical. And so I wouldn't mind throwing up to Coxie when you get some chances. And the field side of Winnipeg's DBs, I think, are also ripe for the picking. So I think you could potentially have a big day offensively if you're the Toronto Argonauts. What is your one thing this week, JB?
It was connected to run defense. I'm looking. I'm going to set the bar pretty high. I'm going to try and see if they can get under 5 yards for the game. So I want to see if the Toronto defense can hold Winnipeg to an under 5 yard average.
Okay, I was going to say like 5 total yards, because that's not happening.
No, but under a 5 yard average, that will put them, top 2 or 3 in the league if they can do it. So it's a challenge, but if they're able to, I think they win handily.
And I'm going to choose something offensive. Last week, Nick Arbuckle did not throw an interception. I believe that was for the first time this season that he didn't throw an interception. And it makes a world of difference. And that's my one thing this week. I want another game like that. No interceptions from Nick Arbuckle, and I think this turns into a Toronto Argonauts victory. That is my one thing. It is time for Put Me Down for 20. JB, you had a decent week last week. I had a poor week last week. The first time since the opening week for me that it was garbage on both of my bets. You won one bet and it was at plus money, so you were up on the week. You had Toronto plus 158. You just missed on your Montreal under plus 300. You set it super low. They almost had it, if not for that last field goal that put it over. You would have been laughing, which is fine. You're still at plus 2. You're at 230 golden fleeces on the year from your starting 200. I am in the red for the first time since week 1. I'm at 195 and a half golden fleeces after the Elks let me down and Dejan Brissett did not get a touchdown. Those were both plus 400 bets and neither one connected. All right, let's go to you for your bets this week. You have honors. Where are you putting your fleeces?
Well, the first one was like the most obvious one was the books do not love Toronto. Plus 225 Toronto as the road dog.
I know. I mean,
225 is a lot of juice.
It is a stunning number.
Ottawa. That's Ottawa and Calgary juice.
Yeah. Yeah.
No way. I'm like, no. Did the book even watch Winnipeg? No way. No way. 225. That's like a 10-point spread.
And what is your second wager going to be?
So I swung for the fences, because my fleece status is pretty good here. So I'm going to go Kenny Lawler, first touchdown, plus 650.
All right, I like it. Have you ever connected on a first touchdown bet?
No, I know. It is my siren song.
And as is picking Ottawa and Edmonton. That's for whatever reason that hasn't connected. I like that number 2 though. I like both those bets. I've only copied one of them, and I didn't copy it. In fairness, I did have this before we recorded, but I am loading up. I'm putting 15 of my 20 golden fleeces on Toronto plus 225. I just love that. I just think it's wrong. I think the number is just wrong. I understand Toronto being a dog in Winnipeg, but coming off of that performance, knowing that Zach Collaros is probably not going to play, I don't care where the football game is, plus 225 is just a wrong number. And so that makes so much sense. And then for my other 5 golden fleeces, I feel like I'm caught in your trap, JB. I'm going back to the Elks. They let me down last week. I'm going to give them the opportunity to redeem themselves. They're at plus 158 this week. And I just feel like, Hamilton on the road 2 weeks in a row, both long trips. They're feeling pretty good about that exciting win in BC. I think this is definitely one that can kind of creep up on them. Edmonton can steal a victory. So that is my 5 golden fleeces at 158. And as we wrap up this segment, I should remind you, the listener, that you should not take any of our betting advice very seriously. We don't, and you shouldn't as well. And if you are going to bet on the games, only ever bet what you're comfortable losing as the cost of entertainment. Finally, into Challenge Flag. It was another victory for me last week, JB. I picked Hamilton as the game to challenge. You had the BC Lions, and so that evens us up at 4 wins apiece heading into week 9. Let's see what you've got for this week. So we open up with Calgary at Ottawa. We don't know the status of Vernon Adams Jr. as the time of this recording. That makes it a little bit more interesting enough for you to go with the Red Blacks that you've sworn off of forever?
No. I'm off the All Caps. Obviously, that's a problem if Vernon Adams is not there. But I'm gonna go with Calgary. Bouncing back. I think they're gonna take care of Ottawa.
And I'm interested to see, if Adams doesn't play, I'm going to be very intrigued to see PJ Walker, to see what he can do, because is so much hype about him signing in Calgary, and he only had a couple passes at the end of last week's game, did not look at all ready. But sometimes that happens. You don't expect to go into a game, suddenly you're thrown into a difficult spot. If he is the quarterback this week, I'm curious to see how he handles things. Toronto at Winnipeg. Are you sticking with your boatman for this one?
Yeah. I think they get it done. I think they feel really confident. I think they at least didn't have any significant health setbacks. They're starting to get a little healthier. I think Winnipeg is going in the opposite direction. As long as they can control Chris Drevler and his, backyard run around football. Which can be hard because, football's, you have a kind of a plan, and it's hard to plan against somebody who's just making it up. But I like Toronto.
Hamilton at Edmonton. What do you think about
that one? Hamilton. I think Hamilton continues. I think the poor Elks continue to elk.
And then finally, Saskatchewan at Montreal. That's a pretty tough one.
It is. I like Montreal. I don't think Saskatchewan has shown that they are necessarily that forceful. There are no great teams this year. I think Calgary has shown they're very good when Vernon Adams is playing at the top of his game, but I don't think Saskatchewan is good enough to pick on the road in Montreal, even with the backup quarterback. I think that Montreal defense is a problem.
They're good. They are good. Those linebackers are so good.
Oof, so good. That pass rush is ferocious. I mean, I know Toronto had some issues, but it was impressive to watch. It's depressing.
I don't know who to challenge here, because I can see 3 of your picks that I disagree. Well, it's not that I disagree with them. I could see them going the other way. I don't know enough to challenge Calgary, Ottawa, because if Vernon Adams isn't playing, then I think I could see taking Ottawa, but I don't want to gamble on that, not knowing anything. I agree that Toronto is probably going to beat Winnipeg. The Hamilton-Edmonton game, I've picked Edmonton with the spread, but even money, I don't like them quite as much. I think I'm going to go with the Saskatchewan pick. I think I will challenge your Montreal Alouettes pick. That's where I will throw my challenge flag. So I have the Riders for this week, and I'll see if I can pull ahead in challenge flag since you seem to be doing all the winning in Put Me Down for 20. I got to make sure I don't get swept in both of our picks categories this year. Well, that will just about wrap things up for us this week on the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough. The game is coming to you sooner than you think. It is Friday night at Princess Auto Stadium in Winnipeg. 8:30 Eastern is the kickoff time. Toronto at the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see you.